In starting the portrait, the very first consideration is the correct assessment of proportions of the model's face. And I have a method for dealing with that. I look at the model and I try to determine what the relative proportions are between the top of the hairline, the beginning of the hairline as it meets the forehead, down to the top of the eyebrows, the length from the top of the eyebrows to the bottom of the nose, and the distance from the bottom of the nose to the bottom of the chin. I look at those three areas on the model and I determine whether or not those three lengths are equal thirds, or if not, in what way do they differ? Which of those segments are longer? Which of those segments are shorter? Now, I judge the distances of length of the model's face as my first consideration. Now, as I look at Erin, expecting those three lengths to be equal thirds, I can quickly see that the highest place on her forehead, where the hair begins, down to the top of the eyebrows, is a considerably shorter length than is the length from the eyebrow to the bottom of her nose. When I look at the bottom of the nose to the bottom of the chin and consider that perhaps that is the same length as the distance from the eyebrow to the bottom of the nose, I can also see that from the bottom of the nose to the chin is a slightly shorter distance than is the length from the eyebrow to the bottom of the nose. So those three lengths on Erin's face are not equal. From the highest place on the forehead to the eyebrow is relatively short. From the eyebrow to the bottom of the nose is relatively long. From the bottom of the nose to the bottom of the chin is slightly shorter. So I deal with distances of length first. Then I indicate the thickness of the eyebrows. Erin's eyebrows are not especially thick. And I come down underneath the eyebrows the appropriate length until I get to the beginning of the eyelid. And I will make a mark on my canvas indicating what that distance is. Then the fullness of the eyelid, and Erin has very full eyelids, so that's a long space. Then the opening of the eye. I do that with each eye. The thickness of the eyebrow, the distance to the beginning of the eyelid, the opening of the eyelid, the opening of the eye. Then I take the space from the bottom of the nose and assess the distance downward to the bottom of the shadow. Then the distance from the bottom of the shadow to the top of the upper lip. I normally also judge the distance from the bottom of the nose to the upper lip. Then the fullness of the upper lip till I get to the center line of the mouth. Then the relative fullness of the lower lip in comparison to the upper lip. Erin's lower lip is somewhat fuller and longer than is her upper lip. Then the distance underneath the lower lip until I get to the beginning of the chin, which is a short space on Erin, and then the remaining space on the chin. After assessing the lengths, I'll also indicate the height of her hair and the height of her glasses. After assessing the lengths of the face, I then get the width of the face by beginning with a drawing of the nose. And in drawing the nose, I'm going to pay particular attention to matching the angles or slant of the model's nose. I feel it's also very important to judge correctly the width of the base of the nose. After drawing the nose, its angles and its width, I also indicate any shadows that there may be on the side of the nose. And then I move a little to the right and a little to the left of the nose, and I begin putting in the corners of the eyes. And when doing so, I use a plumb line to determine how close the corner of the eye may be to the side of the nose. From that point on, I simply judge everything by eye, what the relative widths are, until I get to the end of the eye socket. I do the width of the eye on my right and then the width of the eye on my left. As I move to the right, I'm going to indicate the shapes of the shadows, and I'll judge the distances or spaces between the patterns of shadow and the patterns of light. At all times, I'm going to pay a great deal of attention to matching angles. And as I've mentioned in the videos that I've done in the past, particularly in the drawing video, I believe the ability to be able to see and match angles, slants, is an important skill to acquire. Now, I'm going to begin the drawing now. I'm going to dilute the paint with the turpentine and stand oil. And I'm using first the raw sienna and black mixture that is on my palette. Now, I'm going to wipe some of the paint off of my brush so that what I will be drawing with will be a stain-like consistency. And I'll make my first drawing in that material. I will then switch to a slightly smaller brush, and I will darken my paint by adding a little bit of burnt umber to the raw sienna and black. I'll also be diluting the paint a little bit more so that the line that I make the second time I draw will be darker, thinner, sharper, more liquid, and more accurate than the lines that preceded it. And if I go to a third drawing, which is highly probable, I may use a smaller brush still. I'll darken the paint progressively with more burnt umber. I'll dilute my paint so that it's more liquid, so that my last mark will always be the one that I can most easily see because it will be thinner, darker, sharper, more liquid, and more accurate than those that preceded it. So in effect, I'm going to be starting with a broom and ending with a needle. From a distance, one can more easily see proportions, masses, and values. When you are close to the model, you can more easily see the color and the detail. Okay. I'm going to do the portrait about life size. I usually leave at least the height of an individual's forehead from the top of the canvas to the top of the hairline. In terms of planning the composition, I'm looking at the widest place on Erin's face on my left, which is the tip of her nose, the widest place on her head on the right, which is the ponytail or the bun that she has on her hair on the right. And I'm dividing her face in half, finding the middle of that width. The middle of that width, as I see it, is where the sideburn on her hair is. Now, if I were to center the head, her face would be too far to the left and too close to the edge of the canvas. Therefore, what I'm going to do is to put her left cheek and the light on her left cheek in the middle of my canvas from left to right. That will mean that the head is going to be slightly to the right of center. I'm going to work very rapidly at this point and put a number of lines in motion and then emphasize those that are most accurate. The errors in portrait drawing are often made in the first 5 minutes, and so I spend a lot of time making sure that these initial marks are rather close to what they ought to be. The marks that I've indicated so far are the top of the glasses, approximately the fullness of her hair to the forehead, the distance from the hairline to the eyebrow, the top of the eyebrow, my first estimate as to the length of the nose, the distance from the bottom of the nose to the upper lip, the fullness of the upper lip to the center line, the relative fullness of the lower lip, the distance to the chin. If you take the span of your own hand and put your thumb on your chin, your middle finger should reach where hopefully your hairline still is. And that'll give you a quick gauge as to what your own head's life size is. your own face's life size is. If you then superimpose that on the model, you can very quickly determine whether you are working life size, under life size, or over life size.